to World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C., calling your kind attention once again to my most recent books, Obama, the Postmodern Coup, The Making of a Manchurian Candidate, with the history of the Carter regime, which is the best guide to what's happening right now, and Obama, the unauthorized biography. Get them both at Amazon.com. You go to Amazon, they give you free shipping. I think they give you Super Saver. They give you a discount if you buy them both. And with doing that, you will support the existence of an opposition against the Obama regime. Now, in terms of this stimulus, the loudmouth Limbaugh has been sounding off about this, and since he's obviously a spokesman for the free market gang, the privateers, as we call them, let's try to address some of his critique. He says, well, this is wrong. The main argument I think he has is that prosperity is just around the corner. As Herbert Hoover put it during 1930, 31, and 32. Prosperity is just around the corner, says Limbaugh, and therefore don't do anything, because anything you do will be too late. We're basically in an Austrian school business cycle, and we're going to have the crash, and we should let creative destruction run its course. Don't you dare interfere with the Depression. The Depression is sacrosanct. Don't you dare interfere with it. Let it go on. Let it essentially destroy a generation of people. Right? Everybody who's in school will be out working at minimum wage jobs. Don't worry about that. That's creative destruction. We don't care about that. Then there'll be a recovery, and won't it be great? We can start a new bubble when the recovery is over. This, of course, is the creative destruction doctrine of Joseph Schumpeter. It is the Andrew Mellon School of Economics. Just to point this out, Andrew Mellon, the tax cheat, the predecessor of Geithner in that department. Andrew Mellon, tax evader, because he didn't think rich people should have to pay. That was his view, and he was crusty enough as an oligarch to say so. Andrew Mellon, friend of fascists, and fascist himself. Andrew Mellon was the Secretary of the Treasury for Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover, the reactionary Republicans elected in 1920, 1924, and 1928. Those three presidents, Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover, served under Andrew Mellon, and he, of course, was a brutal, vicious monetarist, and his famous slogan, liquidate stocks, liquidate bonds, liquidate real estate, liquidate labor, liquidate everything, meaning let it all come down, don't do anything, and then we'll have a period of creative destruction, and then we get on with it. Now, this is what Limbaugh also believes. So he's telling you, he's preparing the argument that anything you do will prevent the automatic recovery, which is looked for by monetarist Austrian theory. And, of course, this is completely fatuous. This is the kind of thinking that made Herbert Hoover what he was. But now let's remember, in terms of that map from the 1930s, Obama is Herbert Hoover. Obama is Herbert Hoover. He's not Franklin D. Roosevelt. Don't fall for this propaganda. This is a cynical effort by the Roosevelt haters. You go back to the 1930s, you'll see that Time magazine, Henry Luce, they hated Roosevelt. That was their stock in trade. Henry Luce of Skull and Bones hated Roosevelt. And Eugene Meyer, the creator of the Washington Post, which now owns Newsweek, hated Roosevelt. He left the Federal Reserve when Roosevelt terminated the gold standard, which at that point was the exact right thing to do, because the British were using the gold standard to strangle everybody else in the world except themselves. Eugene Meyer quit the Federal Reserve, came to Washington, bought a newspaper, and said, I'm going to create a propaganda organ that will fight Roosevelt and fight the New Deal. So Obama is Herbert Hoover. Limbaugh and the monetarist opposition, the people who say no stimulus, don't do anything, let the Depression take its course, that's the Andrew Mellon Party. So the Andrew Mellon Party is fighting the Herbert Hoover Party. The problem that we have in this country right now is that there is no well-organized, visible force for the New Deal in terms of economics. And that would mean a comprehensive look back and a critical evaluation, to be sure, of the New Deal. And therefore, we have Limbaugh is going around saying, oh, Roosevelt's measures prolonged the Depression. Absolute insanity. That's the kind of thinking that made Herbert Hoover the most hated president of the 20th century, bar none. Except, well, Carter gave him a run for his money, but other than that, it's Herbert Hoover. That only the war ended the Depression. Hey, today we have 2 wars and a Depression. How could Bush manage that? If wars ended Depression, you wouldn't have a Depression today because you've got 2 wars. This is simply wrong. War by itself does not end a Depression. War can actually make a Depression worse. What ended the war, of course, was Lend-Lease. What ended the Depression with the onset of the war was Lend-Lease, which allowed Roosevelt for the first time since the very beginning, when he didn't know quite what to do it, whether we could do it in this way. Lend-Lease is the measure that harnesses the credit system to defense production and produces a broad-based recovery. Now, since we know all this, we've studied the New Deal retrospectively, we can tell you that what would work today to end the Depression, stop the Depression in its tracks, and end it in a period of months, is a return to Lend-Lease for the home front, not using federal spending, but using federal lending. Seize the Federal Reserve. Seize the Federal Reserve, nationalize it, issue $1 trillion for production only. That goes into industry, agriculture, infrastructure, and all the other productive and socially necessary activities, not financial services, not money laundering, not gambling, not narcotics, prostitution, pornography, the other areas that some think are essential for liberty. The libertines, I guess we can call them, not what the libertines say. That's the story. So what we have, therefore, is Limbaugh preaching the Andrew Mellon School against Obama, who is nothing but Herbert Hoover. And again, the Herbert Hoover that's active now is the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. After doing nothing for about 1.5 years as the Depression got worse, Herbert Hoover finally said, oh, all right, I'll put aside my free market scruples, and we'll have the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, and I'll give them $3 billion, the equivalent of 1 year's federal budget at that time. So today, 1.5 trillion, and I'm going to pump that into the banking system. When I see banks that are about to fail, I'll prop them up with the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. And of course, it failed. They all went bankrupt. They all closed down. Every one of them insolvent by March of 1933. So the big problem is we need somebody to represent the New Deal. I'm trying to do it here. But clearly, Limbaugh is preaching the old Herbert Hoover, prosperity is right around the corner. Limbaugh also thinks tax cuts are everything. This is the old cynical Reagan ploy to deprive government of resources so that you can destroy it, right? Let it wither on the vine. They want to have a payroll tax holiday. That will help them to destroy Social Security later on. They want to have lift the capital gains tax. Again, this is a bonanza for speculators and rich plutocrats, wealthy elitists. They're always the beneficiaries of these crazy things, right? Notice that when Limbaugh talks about William F. Buckley, he talks about him as Mr. Buckley. Well, that guy, William F. Buckley of the National Review, along with Turnataxis and Habsburg, was a supporter of the Mount Pelerin Society. Mount Pelerin Society. Put that on your list with Bilderberg, Trilateral CFR. Those are the people where we had von Hayek and Mises and Milton Friedman, and that's the plague that helped to cause this depression. We don't need more of it. We need less. Back in a minute.